Bapak Ibu semuanya, sahabat-sahabat semuanya, selamat pagi. Semoga Bapak Ibu, teman-teman, hadirin semuanya berada dalam kondisi sehat walafiat di pagi hari yang cerah ini. Ini saya ada di rumah saya dan saya menghadap ke jendela depan rumah saya dan matahari bersinar terang banget pada pagi hari ini. Dan itu kayaknya udah pertanda deh bahwa hari ini akan jadi hari yang spesial banget. Betul nggak nih Mas Andra nih, Mas Yono nih?
Sangat betul sekali Mas Indra. Dan Mas Indra terlihat lebih ganteng pagi hari ini.
Alhamdulillah ya, karena ngelihatnya baru sekarang. Kalau dari dulu-dulu sebenarnya ganteng juga sebenarnya.
Silakan Mas Indra.
Oke. Pertanyaan dulu nih, hari ini akan ada hadiah-hadiah juga nggak seperti kemarin ini, Mas Andra, Yono?
Ada 3 gram emas.
Waduh, saya boleh ikutan nggak itu? Lumayan soalnya itu. Oke, kita mulai ya. Tadi saya udah sempat ngobrol dengan speakers kita pada pagi hari ini di backstage dan saya udah nggak sabar ingin perkenalkan mereka semuanya. Jadi mohon izin Mas Yono, Mas Andra untuk saya ambil alih panggungnya. Oke. So Bapak Ibu, sahabat-sahabat semuanya, hari ini spesial khususnya pagi hari ini karena kita kehadiran 2 pembicara internasional dari Amerika yang akan sharing berbagi bagaimana sih kita perlu merespons dan juga memimpin organisasi kita di era rebound ini. Dan mohon izin, karena yang bersangkutan berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris, maka saya izin untuk menyampaikan sesi ini dan memoderasi sesi ini juga dalam bahasa Inggris. Nanti kalau Bapak Ibu ada pertanyaan, seperti biasa silakan tulis di chat box, nanti saya akan ajukan pertanyaannya. Pertanyaannya boleh ditulis dalam bahasa Inggris, boleh juga ditulis dalam bahasa Indonesia. Jadi cari aja mana yang paling nyaman untuk Bapak Ibu semuanya. Nanti saya akan ajukan pertanyaannya, kemudian speakers, pembicara akan menjawabnya dalam bahasa Inggris. Jika diperlukan, saya akan bantu terjemahkan ke dalam bahasa Indonesia. Oke. Sesi ini berlangsung kurang lebih 1 jam sampai jam 9. Dan senang banget karena kita bisa mulai lebih awal, jadi kita punya waktu lebih banyak dengan speaker kita. Baik Bapak Ibu semuanya, mohon izin saya akan switch ke dalam bahasa Inggris. Thank you so much for coming, ladies and gentlemen. It's very beautiful morning today here in Jakarta. And our sessions this morning will discuss about how leaders should embrace the rebound and lead their organizations to capture the opportunities presented in the new era. And we have 2 special speakers from the United States, which will be presenting their thoughts and insights on leadership rebound. They'll be speaking together at the same time for 35 minutes or so, and then it will be followed by question and answers for about 20 to 25 minutes. And the speakers are Adrian Gostick, is a British-born writer who is ranked number 3 on the list of the top 30 global gurus in leadership, and number 9 in organizational culture. He is a sought-after keynote speaker around the world, so we are very lucky to have him here. And Adrian also the author of several best-selling books on employee engagement and corporate culture. The Carrot Principle and All In, those 2 books have been featured in the New York Times and become the #1 bestseller in Wall Street Journal. Larry King of CNN called the book a must-read for modern-day managers. And his latest book, Leading with Gratitude, was released by Harper Business in 2020. And also be presenting and answering your questions today is Chester Elton. He was born in Canada, and he's the co-founder of the Culture Works, a global training company, and the author of multiple award-winning books, #1 New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal bestsellers. His books have been translated into 30 languages and have sold more than 1.5 million copies. Wow. In 2020, Global Gurus Research Organization ranked Chester #4 among the world's top leadership experts and #2 among the world's top organizational culture experts. The Employee Engagement Awards 2020 named him a top 101 global employee engagement influencer, and Engagely named him top HR influencer of 2020. So yes, we are actually double lucky this morning having these 2 brilliant gentlemen sharing their thoughts and inspirations to us all. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Chester and Adrian to the stage. Please, a round of applause for them both.
Thank you.
Oh, good morning, Adrian. Good morning, Chester.
On a Saturday morning, I'm very pleased on a Saturday morning.
Yes,
very pleased.
Can you hear Adrian okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some issue with the.
Yeah, sorry,
Hello?
everybody.
Okay, good. I can hear you well now.
Can you hear us both okay?
How about
Yep.
now?
Yep. Yep.
It's all good? All
Good,
right.
good,
Hopefully we,
well, it's okay on my side.
we'll all work now. That's good.
Good, it's okay on my side.
Good. I think we all work. I think hopefully we're sharing. I think it's I start sharing.
Yeah, when you start sharing your slides, it gets a little crazy.
Can you hear me again now? It does, yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we had a test and it all worked
Okay,
great.
we have feedback from the audience that the sound is breaking up. That was
Let's
fine,
have Chester
during
try
the-
yours.
in the breakout.
Let's have
Okay,
try your slide.
Indra, can you hear me okay?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, Chester,
Let's try your slide.
but it's still
Let's try your
it's
slide.
still low in volume.
Your slide, Chester.
Yeah. Let's see if it works on my end, Adrian. Okay, can you hear me okay?
All right, can you say something just to make sure?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you well now.
How about
Chester, can you say something?
me, Indrawan?
Yeah, the volume is a bit low, but we can hear you. It's better.
Okay, great.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let's just begin. Hopefully, we'll get better along the way. So I know that it's not morning now in the United States. It's actually in the evening. So good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're looking forward to hear and learn from you. You have about 35 minutes to present your presentations, and it will be follow up for about 20 to 25 minutes for the Q&A. So, Adrian and Chester, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Indrawan, and thank you, everybody, for being patient with us. I'm Adrian Gostick with my good friend.
Chester Elton, nice to be here.
And we are delighted to be with you today. Hopefully, I seem to be getting a little delay on this, but let's tell you a little bit about us. We've written 14 books together, many of them New York Times bestseller, including books on culture, teamwork, and gratitude. We'll be talking about several of these today. We'll move ahead now. What we're going to talk to you about mostly today is how managers lead through a rebound, how they really focus in on building a high-performance culture, especially during a crisis time. We'll move ahead again. Chess?
Bit of a delay, sorry.
That's great. There we go. When you think about a rebound culture, there are several things to think about. One is an organization, really. The definition is an organization where people who work there believe that what they do matters and that they individually can make a difference. especially in tough times. So I'm going to turn it over now to Chester, who's going to talk to you a little bit about a first case study. And we're going to bring you case studies from various industries, some that may apply to you and some that may not. But I think we can learn no matter what industry we're talking about. Chess?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. You know, WD-40 is a wonderful product. It's a lubricant. And what's interesting is even though we all have a can, what does WD-40 stand for? Am I coming through okay?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, it's good, Chester.
Excellent. So what WD-40 stands for is water displacement 40th formula. Now, why that's important is because the WD-40 culture is all about innovation. And when you talk about rebounding, you need to pivot, you need to innovate. And so in their culture, they believe that they don't make mistakes, they have learning moments. So it took 39 learning moments to get to the 40th formula. Now, in 2008, in the last recession, Gary Ridge, who's the CEO of WD-40, he said, look, everywhere I go, people are asking me, are you okay? Are you well? And he phoned his wife and he said, honey, do I look unwell? Do I give off a sick vibe? And she said, Gary, they're not asking, are you okay? They're asking, are we okay? So he said, let's not waste a good crisis. He said, everywhere people are going, they're going to hear bad news. When they come to WD-40, I want them to hear about the good, about hope. And it's really interesting because he said, you know, we have a positive culture because in a crisis, there's no lying, there's no faking, no hiding conversation. It's important in a crisis to communicate every day, over communicate. If you think you're over communicating, it's probably a good way. Focus on people development. This is a time when you can invest in your people and use gratitude to tie it to the core value, reinforcing those good behaviors. Well, as they came out of the recession in 2010, record earnings. Look at that number, 99% employee engagement, a 300% increase in market cap. They went from $250 million US to $2.5 billion US because they invested in their people, because they had a culture of innovation, because it was safe to make mistakes as long as you learned from those mistakes and moved on. Well, it brings us to how do you create that rebound culture? And Adrian, we did a lot of research and a lot of study around all-in cultures.
We did. And how am I sounding now, by the way? Still not very good?
It's okay. We can hear you. It's not
good,
very
okay.
clear, but it's good enough.
Good enough. Awesome. So our research for our book, All In, was based in the last recession, 2008 and 2009. We did a worldwide survey, including organizations, companies in the Pacific Rim, in Asia, in North America, Europe. It was the largest survey ever on elements of great work cultures done for us by the global research firm Willis Towers Watson. Now, what we found, if we go to the next slide, is, there we go. How do cultures get people engaged in tough times? And we'll move again ahead because we found three big aha. The first is that cultures that create high performance results in a rebound, in a tough time, they have people who are engaged, enabled, and energized. Let me explain these terms. The first is that engaged people feel a strong attachment to the organization, and they're willing to give extra effort when asked. Now, that means employees are willing to take on extra assignments, do extra for the organization, and they believe in your mission and your values. The second idea is they feel enabled. That means that they feel supported, also empowered. If you are an employee and you are engaged but not enabled, it's a little like a hamster spinning on a wheel. You've got nowhere to go. Energized is the third idea that we found was correlated here to high performance cultures in a rebound. In the best cultures, inspire team members with purpose and drive. Now, there are some financial benefits of running an organization this way. One reason that the financial press was very interested in our work, we found, looking at just operating margin, that companies with low engagement to high engagement, we saw about a 40% difference if you could get higher engagement people. But look what happens when you have high levels of engaged, enabled, and energized people. In other words, you're empowering your people, you're supporting them, and your energy levels high by letting them know why the work they're doing is so important. We'll move on here. There we go. So what are the drivers of engagement? Again, no matter where you are in the world, the number one driver we found of employee engagement is an idea we call opportunity and well-being. In other words, to get engaged people, I have to make sure that they have the opportunity to do their best work every day. They have the opportunity to grow and develop, and somebody cares about their well-being. Typically, that's the manager. That's the leader. The number two driver is trust. In other words, I trust my manager, but I feel trusted. I feel trusted and empowered. And the third driver to create engagement is an idea we call pride. I'm proud of this organization and the work we do. To drive pride, you have to create something we call alignment. That means everything that I do, I understand the mission here. I understand our values. I understand how my work is aligned to those bigger ideas like mission and values. When that happens, people are more proud of their organization and they're more engaged. The number one driver of communication the number one driver of trust was communication. The more open and honest and transparent we can be as leaders, the more that we drive trust, which drives engagement. And the reason that we're going to talk about gratitude in just a minute was the number one driver of opportunity and well-being in employees was feeling appreciated, feeling like somebody is grateful for my work. We found gratitude and recognition, appreciation, whatever you want to call it, made everything better. And we'll move on again here. Now, this leads us to new research that Chester will take you through on how we lead through a rebound with gratitude. Chester?
Thanks, Adrian. You know, it was very interesting that in all the great cultures, all the great leaders, all the great teams that we studied, there was always this thread of gratitude, that they were appreciative of the people that worked with and for them, that they were grateful for the people that showed up and worked hard every day. So we asked, how do you, in tough times, how do you engage not just the minds, how do you engage the hearts and minds of your people? How do you get them to focus on the right behaviors? And like in the last recession with WD-40, how do you keep hope alive? How do you keep people positive? Well, we're going to take you to university and take you to our Gratitude 101 class. The first case study that we want to share with you is the remarkable turnaround of the Ford Motor Company. Alan Mulally was the CEO at the time. He had come over from Boeing, from the big airline manufacturer. And he came into a culture that was pretty toxic. I lived in Detroit, where their headquarters are for a while. And it's a culture of kill or be killed, right? Eat what you kill. So he comes into this culture and says, hey, everybody, it's all about your people. It's about appreciating them. It's about loving them up. It's about thanking them every step of the way. So it took a while for that to take hold. When he took over in 2006, employee engagement was at a record low, 20%. They had businesses operating all around the world in disparate brands. They had Jaguar and Range Rover, and they were actually competing with each other. They had declining sales. In fact, Alan asked Bill Ford, the chairman of the company, he said, how bad is it? He said, it's pretty bad. He says, give me a number. He says, we're on track to lose $17 billion this year. That's a lot of money. And he said, by November that year, we'd hit that goal. We had lost $17 billion. Now, I want to take a minute and talk about a lot of leaders that we talk with. They think that gratitude is a soft skill and a nice to have. We would tell you that it is a hard skill, and particularly in a crisis, when you're trying to rebound, it's an absolute must-have. Because you are a leader that leads with gratitude, it doesn't mean you're soft. In fact, Alan was a very demanding leader. In fact, he had a system where every week his leaders would meet and he'd put up a spreadsheet and he'd say, if your project's on track, it's green. If you're behind schedule, it's yellow. And if you're stuck, it's red. Well, you see, in the Ford culture, no one ever admitted that they had a problem. So the first meeting, everything's green. Second meeting, everything's green. Third meeting, everything's green. And Alan says, wait a minute. How can everything be going well? Did I mention we just lost $17 billion? So in the next meeting, the president of North America, Mark Fields, he's the one on the far right there, he puts up a red square. I'm stuck. I've got a problem in our factory in Canada. And everyone else thought for sure this was the end of his career, that security was going to grab him and march him out of the building. Alan, on the other hand, leaned back with a big smile on his face and he started to clap. He said, at that moment, I knew we had a chance because we started to trust each other. In fact, he said, let's go around the room. How can we help Mark? And within about 20, 30 minutes, all these ideas poured in, problem solved. He said, it's about being transparent, about sharing information. He said, you have a problem. You are not the problem. As soon as he got them there, he knew they had a chance. So how did he do it? He focused on small wins. That red square, that was a win. Sharing everything, being transparent, even being vulnerable, staying optimistic. We can get through this. Hope. And the one Ford culture, we're all in this together. Now, it's interesting. Sometimes in tough times, we say, well, we don't have time for gratitude, right? We're doing hard things. He said, withholding your gratitude in tough times is shooting yourself in the foot. That's when you need people engaged. And when people are more grateful, they are more engaged. They're more focused. They're more productive. They're more innovative. So don't think that by leading with gratitude that you're soft. Alan Mulally is anything but a soft leader, very demanding. So what was the result? 1991, or 2014, 91% employee engagement from 20%. Didn't take any government bailout money. Didn't have to. Went from a $17 billion deficit to a $6.3 billion profit. And their stock increased by 1,837%. Now, here's what's interesting. He left in 2015. You see their stock? It declined. Adrian and I asked him, we said, how did that happen? He said they thought they'd figured it out. They took it for granted. They stopped holding themselves accountable, and it gradually disappeared. So a lesson to be learned here, that when you get your culture where you want it to be, don't take it for granted. Stay with it. Culture is an everyday.
And I may add, if I may, Chess, one of the ideas too that Alan said was that every step forward was gratitude. When Mark Fields identified one red and they were able to turn it to a yellow, which meant they had a plan, that was a celebration. That was gratitude. When a yellow turned to a green, it was gratitude again. Every step forward, he says, you have to be reinforcing and being grateful to your people.
Excellent. Thanks, Adrian. And that brings us to the 8 leadership experiments as we continue our education. You know, it was really interesting that when we studied how did the best leaders do it, it was seeing and expressing, soliciting and acting on input, assuming positive intent. We'll get into that a little more later. Walking in their shoes, looking for small wins like they did at Ford. In expressing, it was give it now, give it often, don't be afraid. Tailor it to the individual. Reinforce core values and make it peer-to-peer. Adrian, what would you add as we did the research around seeing and expressing?
One of the things we found, I thought that was very interesting, was that gratitude is not just about thank you, thank you, thank you. That's part of it, but it is pretty much meaningless if you are not seeing the value that is being created in your team. That's what we found, is that people want to be appreciated for the value that they bring when we are trying to come out of a tough time, like a crisis.
Exactly. So it's really important that you understand that there's the 2 elements here, seeing and then expressing. Well, we're not going to go through all 8, but we want to take some time on assume positive intent. Indira Nooyi, the retired chairman of Pepsi, she said, you know, when you assume positive intent, your whole approach to a person or a problem, it's very different. It's about solving the problem. It's not about blaming the person. When you assume negative intent, you can get angry very quickly. You blame the messenger. How could you do this to me, right? And you can very quickly get people to avoid bringing you any problems at all, which is never a good idea. So, best illustrated in a story. You know, we got to interview a really interesting Lynn Carnes. She's a risk manager at a bank. And as a risk manager, she's always looking for mistakes, for problems, right? Well, she started to travel as an executive coach. And of course, when you travel a lot, you get all the privileges of a frequent traveler. You get in the expert traveler line. You know, you go through more quickly. So she tells the story. She's at the airport. She's in the expert traveler line and it's not moving. And she says, why? And she looks at the front and she sees a mother with a baby with the stroller and the diapers and all the stuff that goes with traveling with a baby. And her first reaction was to blame, assume negative intent. How did she get in my line? I've got important things to do. When something happened that snapped her out of it, she took her baby and put this precious baby on the dirty floor of the airport where hundreds of people had been walking, right? And that's when Lynn said, you know what? She's just trying to get to her gate like me. So she asked a fellow traveler to watch her back, went to the front of the line and said, can I help? Picked up the baby, helped her get through the line. She said it was really an awakening for me because I was assuming negative intent and I was doing it everywhere. I was waiting for everyone to make me look bad. I was protecting myself. And in doing that, I thought I was safe, but I wasn't. Assuming positive intent. Here are some bullet points. And, you know, Adrian, feel free to jump in, but we found that, you know, usually you assume negative intent because there's a lack of information. Go talk to the person. Pick up the phone. Get more information. Talk about how we can avoid doing the same mistakes again. Pay close attention to your communication. Avoid that passive aggressive language. Adrian, what would you add?
I think these are really important because we do this so often in our lives. The sales department's not talking to the finance department, and sales is angry with finance and vice versa, versus just finding all the information out first and picking up the phone and going to see them and realizing everybody comes in wanting to do a good job. Everybody wants the company to succeed. Nobody's trying to bring the organization down. And I think you're right. It's even more important during a crisis that we actually assume everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to do what's right. And things happen.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to our next step. And I'll turn it over to you, Adrian, for small win.
Well, one of the people we interviewed for the book was a man named Ken Chenault. And Ken just recently retired as the CEO of American Express, the credit card company, 70,000 employees around the world, and a remarkable leader. And one of the things he told us is that if you're taking a journey, you look for little signposts along the way that point out you're on the right path. And he says that's what recognition does for you. He says gratitude at small steps helps you know you're on the right path. So when I was in college, back in university, I took a bowling class. I thought that sounded kind of fun. I'd learn how to bowl. So the first day, I don't know if you have too much bowling in Indonesia, but we do in the US. And so we were all throwing bowling balls down at the pins on the other end. And the professor, if you can call him a professor, gathered us all together. And he says, no. He says, you're not aiming for the pins down at that other end. You're aiming for those little arrows. You see them about 15 feet in front of the foul line. He says, you get your arrow right, you hit your ball to that arrow, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to hit the right pins. Well, immediately we all went back and our scores improved exponentially because we weren't shooting for the long target, we were shooting for the short target, and it made our game better. Well, likewise in business, we don't want our people shooting at long targets, especially during a rebound, during a crisis. We want to give them very short, achievable goals and provide gratitude for every step along the way. We'll move to the next slide here. Now, let me tell you about one leader we have followed recently. His name is Bill Manning. Now, this is football, FIFA football. They call it soccer here in North America, but you know the sport. It's the Major League Soccer is the teams here in the United States and Canada. And Bill Manning is president of the Toronto Football Club. Now, a typical football club, if you like Chelsea or you like Barcelona, whatever your team is, the team itself, the employees, are actually a small group. Less than 100 full-time employees work for a football club. Though there's hundreds on game day, full-time employees, it's a smaller group. Now, Bill said when he got to Toronto, there was divisions. Teams just did not talk to each other. Like accounting would not work with sales. Marketing was angry with the human resource department. Human resources was angry with everybody. He says, my team just did not work together. And he says, I wanted to use gratitude to bring my team together. So he says, every Monday morning, I would bring my team together, about 60 people. And he says, I would ask them, who are you going to be grateful for today? It has to be somebody in another team, another department. And he would pick on 3 or 4 employees. And they had to recognize somebody who worked in a different department who would help them during the previous week. And it got everybody thinking during the week, am I doing enough to help other departments out? And it was a good recognition prize that they got. It was in some cases a gift certificate to a restaurant. In other cases, it was a clothing store, nice gift certificate. And so one time we were there, he said, John, you're in sales. Who would you like to be grateful for today? And John said, I'd like to recognize Aaron, who's in accounting. Because when I sell a season ticket package, Aaron calls my customers up. He's so excited for them, gets payment. but he also keeps the energy levels so high. He says, that's terrific. And so he broke down these silos of the different teams and departments through gratitude. Now, you see, in 2014, when Bill came in, the team hadn't made the playoffs. And yet by 2017, there's Bill Manning standing right next to his team as they're hoisting the North American trophy from bottom of the barrel to the top of the heap by doing simple little things like recognition. Chester?
Yeah, I love the story of Bill Manning because he turned it around pretty quickly. That's a pretty quick turnaround for a football club. Well, yeah. Praise effort, reward results. Often as leaders, we think, I'll remember, at the end of the week or the end of the quarter or the end of the year to recognize whoever on the team did something great. We love the analogy of a banana. Bananas don't keep for very long. Neither does your memory around recognition or gratitude. In fact, it's kind of interesting. If we don't do it now, odds are we won't remember. And the benefit is the closer the recognition is to the behavior, the more likely it is to be repeated. Well, we came across a really interesting study. 10,000 people were asked, do you know how to ride a bike? Only 3 people responded, did not know how to ride a bike. 2 women and 1 man. And what does that tell you? Women are probably more honest in giving their answers than men. Right, Adrian?
Sure, yeah.
What they really wanted to know is, how did you learn how to ride a bike? You might remember your brother or sister, your mom or dad, put you on the bike and they're running next to you. And they're encouraging you. Hey, you're doing great. Hey, you went further than last time. Keep pedaling. You missed the curve. Hey, that doesn't look like we'll need to take you to hospital, right? Encouraging effort, because you don't always get the results you want. You want people to get back up, to try again, like this guy. Whoops, let me go back here really quick. Slide, here we go. Like this guy. Trying hard, you want him to get up. The more you practice, the better you play. And Adrian,
he needs some praise. Yeah.
I'll give you $5 American if you can name who won the gold medals.
Oh yeah, they all. Yeah, they're all gonna know.
That brings us to tailor it to the individual. Adrian, take it away.
Okay, and I know we're maybe taking a little bit more time than we may have anticipated, but we're having some fun here, and hopefully this is helping. The other idea on gratitude is that it's not just about, hey, thank you. It's not just about giving the same reward to everyone. Recognition, gratitude, to be very personalized is more meaningful. So let me give you an example here. When Chester and I first started working together, if we move ahead on slides, we worked together at a big company, and we ended up writing the company's first book on, and Chester, bless his heart, wanted to get me recognized. So he went to the CEO and he said, we should be grateful to Adrian for helping write this book, and let's get him recognized. Well, Chester's top motivators are ideas like friendship and fun and teamwork, all these great attributes. My top motivators are ideas like creativity, autonomy, more working alone, family. Chester thought I would love to be recognized like he would like to be recognized. So he had me invited to this big banquet during a weekday where I went, and there was 200 people I didn't know, but Chester thought, he'll come and meet all these people. And, I didn't know any of them. So I sat there for 4 hours. And at the end, they presented a watch. And Chester wanted to give me a watch because he noticed I didn't have a watch. And he loves watches. Now, I don't mean to appear ungrateful.
Yeah, Adrian, you often say you don't appear ungrateful, but it does kind of sound like you're just a little ungrateful, right?
Okay, well, but I knew in their hearts they meant well, but it missed the mark. Because if they'd have come to me because they knew my motivators and said, Adrian, we know your top motivator is creativity. Number 2 is autonomy. Why don't we give you an assignment where you can use your motivators, maybe to come up with the next big idea or spend some time with your family. It actually did help us develop our motivators assessment. This is something we created and has been used around the world now. We created it with a team of psychologists. On the next slide, you'll see that it spits out from 1 to 23 what your motivators are, which we've clumped here into a factor analysis. On the next slide, you'll see too that you have strong motivators, moderate, and neutral. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the motivators assessment, you can certainly send a note to our assistant, Christy, at the CultureWorks, or just go to the cultureworks.com. It's very important to understand what motivates people before you understand really how you can be grateful. Right, Chess? Be grateful. Chester?
Yeah.
Chester?
I mean, in summation, seeing the expressing.
Yes, we can hear you well.
It's really important. Can you hear us okay now?
I think you're back.
Okay, great. So wrapping up on the gratitude, all those things we talked about, it's seeing, it's about expressing. Make sure you're soliciting and acting on input. Assume that positive intent. Walk in their shoes. Look for small wins. Give it often. Don't hold back your gratitude, especially in hard times. Tailor it to the individual. Don't give a watch to somebody who hates watches. Reinforce your values and make it peer-to-peer. Well, one of the things, Adrian, that we really loved was every leader we studied, they didn't leave their best selves at work. They also took it home. So we wrapped up the book with some best practices around how are you expressing your gratitude for those that are the most important to you. Dave Kerpen, a good friend of ours, said, at dinner, we asked 3 questions. What was the best part of your day? Who are you grateful for that's not at the table? And who are you grateful for who's at the table, who hasn't been thanked yet? Changed everything. He said we taught our families how to serve together, how to give, how to embrace hard times. They said, you know, when we came home, we wanted to show up as our best selves, to be happy to see our families, to embrace the goodness that we know works in the office and bring it home. Well, Adrian, we've got one last story, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, Chess. And thanks, everybody, for putting up with all the technological. You never know what kind of issues you'll face. We have one last story for you, which is a wonderful story from a man whose name is Max Dupree. Max was the chairman and CEO of the Herman Miller Company for many years. They make office furniture and multi-billion-dollar company worldwide. One of the things that Max told us, and we asked him, how did you learn how to become the kind of wonderful leader that he was? He said, I actually learned my best leadership lesson when I was a new grandfather. He says, my first granddaughter was born and she was very premature. She only weighed 1 pound, 8 ounces. He says, I got to the hospital and I could take my wedding ring and slide it all the way from her arm to her shoulder. She was that tiny. The doctors only gave her a 5% chance of living 3 days. He says, that's what greeted us when we got to the hospital. And a wise nurse took me aside before we went in, and she said, this baby needs somebody right now to be with her. Can you, Max, be her surrogate father? Come in every day and rub her arms and rub her legs and tell her how much you love her. Can you do that? And Max said, I will. He says, I came in every day and I would rub her arms and rub her legs, and I would talk to her. I would tell her about her family, that she was from a family of fighters and that we needed her. And Zoe, day by day, left. And the days turned into weeks and weeks into months. And we recently heard that Zoe just graduated from medical school. And he says, as we were leaving the hospital, and everybody was celebrating because Zoe had beaten the odds. And somebody asked, I had a chance to chat with Ruth, that nurse who took me aside. And she said, you know what I made you do that day, Max? I made you combine your voice with your touch. Our voice is who we say we are. That's our mission, our values, what we say we are as a leader. But our touch is how we interact with people every day. Are you looking for those little wins? Are you giving people a mission and that noble why? Are you engaging the people in your team? And are you leading them to a better future? That's our touch. Our voice is powerful, but our touch is really what will move people forward. So we want to thank you for allowing us to share a few ideas with you today. Now we'll stop sharing the screen and we'll love to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Adrian and Chester. Wonderful presentations, and it's exactly 35 minutes.
Oh,
so great timing.
Excellent.
So that leaves us with about 30 minutes of Q&A. So it's quite a lot of time for us having Q&A. So there are already some questions coming in on the chat box, and I would like to invite everyone to write your questions in the chat box. Yep. So I'm going to start with the first questions that was already coming in earlier. You mentioned about the triple E, the engage, enabled, and energized. So how does that actually apply in the organizations? What does it look like? And do you have any research that back that up, or some evidence about the applications of the triple E?
Yes, I can start there, Indrawan. Our book called All In is actually the research study that encompasses this idea of the 3 E's. The research was done for us by a big research firm, Willis Towers Watson. We began with an 8 million person normative database, and we identified from that 300,000 people who were in organizations worldwide that were outperforming their peers in the last recession. And so the last 10 years, we've been sharing this with organizations, and we've had companies from Bank of America, Danaher, Cisco, and many others embrace this methodology of the 3 E's to help lead their organization. Procter & Gamble, another one, right, Chester?
Yeah, the research was really definitive that when you had the 3 E's in place, everything got better. By the way, I've noticed in the chat box, we owe $5 to Mohammed. He knew the gold winners' names, so we'll have to figure out a way to get him that $5.
Yeah. And you promised, Chester, so he's going to find you.
$5.
Yeah, he's going to fly over there to United States to get. Okay, thank you, Adrian. So you mentioned that in the book All In, you already outlined the research about the triple E, the 3 E's. But the question is more like, how do you actually, what does it look like when you say engage and then energized and then enabled? We like to know in more concrete examples how they are applied within the organization.
Sure. I can jump in there. You know, a lot of it is about constant communication, transparency. We love leaders that ask important questions. How are you doing today? Right? Are you engaged? Is there something that's keeping you from being engaged? You know, the enablement. Have you got the tools to do your job? Okay. Do you need a better internet connection? Do you need more people on your team? Do you need more resources? Okay. And then thirdly, great leaders talk about the why of work, not just what and how. And that's the energy. And when you understand the why, that's what gets you through hard times. That's what helps you rebound, because it's not just checking the boxes, producing another widget. It's about making a difference. So check in with your people. How are they doing? What do they need to really be empowered and enabled in their work? And do they understand the why of work? Adrian, would you add anything to that?
Only one last thing is this idea of enabled, because what Chester's talking about is excellent for energizing your people, for engaging your people. I would say the only thing that might be a little bit more encouraged is this idea of enabling which really is supporting your people, making sure they have the right tools and equipment at their disposal, making sure they're trained, they are empowered, and they really are able to, within their job scope, really make a difference. One of the organizations that really gets this right is the Apple Store. I don't know if within Indonesia, and I know everybody's all spread around if you have Apple stores, but it's one of the retail locations we studied for our work. And they're very good at enabling their people, making sure that everybody has the tools and equipment that they need. My son and I went in when he was 16 years old. He went in and his iPod had stopped working, and we went down there, and the young man who was helping him, the employee, actually dropped my son's iPhone on the floor. And we were like, oh, and the young man said, no, sorry, my bad. I will go get you a new one. Within a few seconds, he was back and he handed a new $200 US iPod to my son, whose jaw dropped open. Yeah. At that moment, were we customers for life? Yes. And this young man didn't have to go ask a manager. He didn't have time. He knew what to do. He was empowered, and he was able to really please a customer by that level of empowerment. And, you know, Chester and I joked later, I should have taken my laptop in and given him that too, just as I might have gotten a new laptop out of it.
Okay, thank you, Adrian and Chester. Speaking of the first engage, there's another question about it. The question is, what, in your opinion, engages employees most?
Yeah, you know, listen, we're big believers that if your voice is heard, if your opinions matter, if when you've done something, you remember the definition of a great culture. I believe what I do matters. I make a difference. I like to add, and when I made a difference, somebody noticed it and celebrated it. So we've really seen time and again that when you can reinforce that great behavior with gratitude, with recognition, with appreciation, that's the most powerful tool that most leaders have at their disposal, and they don't use it enough. And I know Adrian agrees with me, so go ahead, Adrian.
I couldn't agree less. No, of course, I agree completely with what Chester's saying. I think just what you mentioned there at the beginning bears repeating. When we go into an organization, oftentimes the leaders will say, we want to increase employee engagement. What do we do? And there are some really simple things we know we can tweak to get the engagement levels to move right away. And one of them is having people's voices heard. You give employees a voice and they feel like they're really being listened to, you'll see engagement levels move right away.
Thank you. I would add one question following up to your answer. You know that in in Indonesia and most Asian countries, paternalistic cultures, you know, with hierarchical, and then it's not like in the West where everybody can just speak up and call by names. So I believe that you have done also research in Asia. So how do you think it is different in the Asian culture, the Western cultures, and how Asian leaders able to engage the teams and the employee, which more likely fit into the cultures?
It's a great question because you're right. We have done worldwide surveys, and so we do see definite differences. However, when we go to countries, it's been about 10 years since I've been in Indonesia, but we do a lot of work in Singapore, Malaysia, and around in the Pacific Rim. And what is very interesting is that younger employees will come up to us and say, "I'm so glad you're here. That we need to change." And so this really is something that is very much appreciated by younger people we're finding within whatever cultures we're going to. But the problem is, it's never a Russian revolution. It never bubbles up from the bottom. This has to start from the top with leaders trying a new way of leading and saying to their people, I need your ideas. We're talking right now about a rebound. And no manager on this call, with the 400 of it on this call, is smart enough by themselves to figure out all the answers. Your answers are underneath you with all the people and all the people around you. Together, you can be Albert Einstein. Alone, you'll never make it.
You know, and I would add to that, you know, the way you act as a leader, it gives everyone else permission to act the same way. So if you're soliciting input, if you're asking for people's opinion, then everyone else on the team will do that as well. It's a great way to change the dynamic. I like to say that leadership is contagious. You know, applicable in a pandemic for sure, right? That the way you act allows for other people to act the same way. If you want more input, ask for it. If you want more gratitude, express gratitude. And then it makes it safe for everyone else to do the same. That is a mechanism that leaders that want to change the culture, change the dynamic, you have to lead by example.
Right. Here's a question trying to that relates to that. So this is from Muhammad Ibrahim Al Hanif. He's in the middle management. So he's not the top level management where Adrian said that, you know, culture change must begin from the top. He's in the middle. His question is, I think, in essence, that what can he do? He's not the top management. He's no longer young as well, not the millennial. Leaving it to the top management and wishing for the best doesn't sound like a good strategy. So you need to do something. I believe most of the participants here today are in the middle management. They're not in the top level management. So what advice can you give them so that they can begin this movement of building gratitude, engagement, energizing people? That's a big question, and I so hopefully you can elaborate on that. As in, you know, very important one.
Yes, and I think in middle management, control what you can control, right? You can't depend on upper management. You can't depend on customers. You are the manager of your team. You can control your team. You know, if you're not getting support from upper management, let it go, right? Don't worry about that. Worry about what you can control. Your team can be really engaged, enabled, and energized if that's what you want. That's my advice. Control what you can control.
And we see this actually when we wrote the book All In, we really thought, oh, only senior leaders will buy it. Actually, that wasn't the case. Most of the people who have read and implemented our work are middle managers. And it's just what Chester's saying, because they actually do have some control. Every manager controls their team culture. And we go into organizations, we find these oases. Within even terrible organizations, we will find a manager that just has a team that's doing phenomenally well. Well, who do you think gets promoted? It's that manager. And they're using some of these cultural building techniques, like listening to employee voices, being grateful, seeing the value that's being created around them, setting a mission. They're doing all the things that should be going on above them, but they're not. They're leading better than they're being led themselves.
Do you think that this middle management people can actually influence the people on the top? And therefore, they're actually not just making sure that the people around them and the people under them is actually doing everything that you say, but they also actually ignite or stimulate the people above them to do the same as well. And if they can, how do you think is the best way of them doing it?
What an interesting question. Well, I don't know if I've ever been asked that one before, but it's a great question because in a way, yes and no. It just depends on your culture. Many times we have seen entire cultures change because of one department, one team that all of a sudden starts doing things a better way. And the entire organization starts learning from there. Now, there are others, sometimes patriarchal organizations that don't like change. And they see this sort of rebel group, And so there are things to decide when this happens. You either decide, can I go along to get along? Do I have to leave? Or can I change the entire organization? Really, the focus for a middle manager is, focus on your team. If others above you learn from it, wonderful. But don't try and push that if they're not willing to listen.
Right.
Just to add to that, results speak loudly. If your results are markedly better than everyone else, upper management should pay attention.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't. As Adrian said, they don't like change. I will say, though, in smart organizations, if you're doing something differently and your results are 2, 3, 4 times everybody else, people will pay attention.
Great. Thank you for the answer. Excellent. It's very doable then. And still hope for the best.
Yes. Inshallah.
Okay, there's a question by Agung Trika. It's quite specific. You mentioned at the end of the presentation, Adrian, about voice and touch. Beautiful examples of saving babies. The question is related to the touch part. You mentioned earlier that the touch part relates to how leaders interact with their teams. Now, the question is, can you give examples on how leaders should interact with teams?
And I think Chester gave one a minute ago, which was really nice, because many of our teams right now are remote. And so how are we interacting with our people, maybe if they're a little bit more remote? So are you reaching out to them, or are you just letting them float like they're bobbing in an ocean? Or are you reaching out to them every single day? And this is something, it's going to take more communication now than less. Or even if they're still coming into the office, you still have the pandemic going on. So the question is, how are you doing today? You ask your people, because today is probably different than yesterday or the day before. How are you coping? How's your family doing? Being a little bit more personal than we've ever been before. Asking people how they're doing, how their families are, and being a little bit more interested in them is one way we begin to touch that we haven't perhaps been before, where we could be a little bit more standoff as a leader. I'm the boss. That's no longer appropriate in this world where we've got to become more caring.
Yeah, I'd be disciplined about it. Make sure you are touching everybody. I think particularly when you're working remotely, there's a fear that you'll be forgotten, that all of a sudden your voice doesn't matter. And those regular touches, it takes a discipline on the manager's point to say, hey, am I missing somebody? I love the question that leaders ask as they reach out, particularly to remote employees. What do you think? What do you think about this problem? What do you think we should do? Tell me what you think. That's a great way to engage people's hearts and minds, because that tells you what? My opinion matters. I'm asked for my opinion. That's a great question. What do you think?
Okay, so by touch doesn't mean that you physically touch them or having really like...
No, because then you get in lots of trouble. HR, human resources, no.
Then you got to get tested. It's a mess.
The context of the pandemic, where we can actually be in person with other people, we can still touch them.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that makes the difference between touch and voice become very blurry. So how do you actually differentiate? So in the context of the pandemic, where we can actually meet somebody in person and interact with them in person. So what is voice and what is touch? Because the way you explained it earlier sounds like voice.
And it's a good point, because something may be lost a little in the translation. But voice is, I may say, I believe in open communication. That's my value. That's how I lead. I'm somebody who believes in transparency, and I'm always open. But the problem is you're not very open. You don't check in with people, seeing how they're doing. When you have information, you kind of keep it to yourself. So your voice may say one thing, but how you really act is very different. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between your voice and your touch, which is your actions. So that's really what we're talking about. When we're talking about touch, that's how we act. Our voice is what we say we will do. Sometimes they're very different, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, just
really
do
makes
what you say you're going to do. Literally, I think it's that simple. Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
You make a promise, keep your promise. You know, that's the touch.
Yeah.
Great. Here's a question from Ika Tuning Kartika, and it's still related to my previous questions about the triple E, the 3 E's within the organizational, the paternalistic hierarchical organizations. The question is about leadership, leader attributes. So can you pinpoint which attributes that is required most from leaders to be able to implement that 3 E's within a hierarchical organizations or paternalistic organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with communication, transparency. You'll notice that when Adrian went through that, you know, what drives engagement, what drove trust was communication. So first and foremost, if you need to trust your leaders, and the way as a leader you can endear trust is you're open and honest and you communicate with your people. I honestly believe you cannot over communicate because people hear messages different ways. You know, in good organizations, they have podcasts, they have print, they have, you know, one-on-one, they've got webcasts, they've got town hall, lots of different ways to get the message out. So first attribute is, as a leader, you have to inspire trust. The way you inspire trust, communication. Secondly,
transparency.
Yeah, in transparency. Secondly, as we've just said, say what or do what you say you're going to do. Be reliable. Keep your promises. Now, the other part is hold people accountable. You know, great leaders aren't just ones that show up and give good news all the time. They hold their people accountable. And at the same time, then express gratitude. We achieved a small win. Let's celebrate. Let's do what we say we're going to do. Let's communicate. Let's trust each other. Let's be transparent. That all has to start with the leader at the top. And I know I've missed something, right, Adrian? What did I miss?
No, I mean, it was great. The other thing I might add is, again, we're talking about patriarchal, sort of top-down organizations. One of the things that people will not really give you their all until they know that you care about them. And what do most employees care about is their careers. And so are you worrying about your people's progression and their growth? You may not be able to give them huge raises or big promotions, but you can help them in their careers get where they want to go, even if it may be very slowly. So one thing we're seeing with these 3 E's is that in great organizations, there's a very careful, thoughtful process of how you develop each employee's career. Some people may not want to become the next, general manager, but they still want to learn and grow and learn new things. That's okay. So be much more deliberate about meeting with your people regularly, maybe even every month or once a quarter, and asking them, where do you want to go in your career? Helping them be realistic, but helping them get the training that they need, the stretch opportunities, and really helping them in their careers develop. When you do that as a manager, your employees are going to care a lot more about what you care about when they know that you care about what they care about, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, and again, back to great questions. Are you regularly asking your people, where do you want to be 2 to 3 years from now? Are you happy where you are? In which case, great. Keep doing great work. If someone says, in 2 or 3 years, I'd like to be a manager, I'd like to lead a team, that gives you great insight in where you can create opportunities for that employee to learn and grow, develop. So again, communication is so important. Ask your people, where are they? Where would they like to go? How can I help you get there? And then, remember what they say. Keep track. Don't forget. Don't keep asking the same question over again. That's not going to work. I think great leaders have build that rapport. And when they build that rapport, what Adrian said, it shows you care. And when I know a leader cares about me, I'm going to work harder.
Right. Wonderful answers. That in terms of how showing gratitude to your team by showing that you care and then you are there to help them progressing in their careers or whatever they wish in their life and work will do for the managers themselves. Here's a question related to that by Mutia Asifa. How do you empower the employees to feel the gratitude and becoming more engaged with their work? So the focus is more not into the leaders, but instead to the team, the employees itself. So how do you empower them to have more gratitude? And
that's a great question. Yeah, no, what a wonderful question, because you're right. This isn't all on the manager. It's not all on your shoulders as a leader. What we find in the great cultures that we have studied, they really spread gratitude around. So in other words, the managers will train their people. These are our 5 values. Our values may be ideas like ownership and dependability, whatever they are. And they teach their people, this is how we do this. And they, just like Bill Manning did with that soccer team, that football team, he asked people to recognize each other. He started every meeting with gratitude, asking, who are you grateful for this week? Who's not in your team? So you find other ways to get other voices involved in this, because a manager will never see everything that's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, put a program in place. You know, give everybody thank you cards, give everybody the opportunity in a meeting to call out someone else. Again, it's that whole idea of permission. I'm going to give you permission to do it. We're stronger when it's peer-to-peer than if it's just top-down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what you mentioned in your presentations, the thank you movement. Like if you can just say thank you to one person, the football story you told about, that's how you can help people to feel the gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, one last question. Is this actually coming from me? It's a big question, but if you can answer it in a very short period of time, what do you think is the toughest challenge for leaders in this pandemic in getting their teams and organizations to get rebound?
Just really quick, I think it's focus. You know, there are so many distractions. Your job is to create that space where people can focus on the work. And then again, assume positive intent. There's going to be times when your family takes over, when, you know, the pandemic takes over. Your job is to get people to focus. Here's what we need to get done. Let's work together to get it done. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in the pandemic is focus. Adrian?
I'm sorry, I lost focus. What was that? No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
See, that's the point. Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think one of the biggest challenges we're seeing with our the people that we are working with, the leaders that we're working with, is really getting them to care about the people in their care. I think the biggest challenge that many of our employees are facing right now is anxiety, it's stress. They're feeling isolated, alone, and that nobody cares for them, whether they are going in still to an office or a place of work, or they're working remotely. They're just feeling such levels of stress and anxiety that we've never seen before. So they're really, to get your people engaged, you got to get to their hearts. Let them know you're safe. I care about you. Let's do this together, and we're going to find our way through this darkness. We're going to stumble through together. That's the message that you have.
Wow, thank you. It seems we have about 1.5 minutes left. So can you say something to the audience, the Indonesian audience here? Is there any specific message that you want to convey to the leaders in Indonesia to help them find their ground and then enthusiastically moving forward, marching forward for the rebound? So please, maybe Adrian, 1 minute, and Chester, 1 minute. Please say something, convey a message to all the leaders here in Indonesia.
For getting up on a Saturday for morning and coming and being with us Saturday mornings, I would say this: if you think back in your mind, many of us are history buffs. In your mind, maybe we have the favorite leader that we've loved for who were church. Chances are your favorite leader you're thinking of in history emerged during the worst of times. That's when great leaders really step up. And right now, we're in some pretty hard times. That's when great leaders step up. I guarantee you that when you are sitting in your retirement party many years from now, and people ask you about you, you're energized around you. And I wish you the best of luck in rallying your people around and coming through this challenge.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well said.
Chester?
I think that, our research shows that when you lead with gratitude, you can achieve extraordinary results at work. I would say, don't forget to take care of yourself and your family. Leading with gratitude is a great way to lead at work. It's an even better way to live. So I would encourage you to live lives of gratitude at work and at home. That would be my blessing for you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you, Chester, for the wonderful session today. We learned a lot from you, and actually more questions being asked, but it seems that we are running out of time. Terima kasih kepada Bapak Ibu semuanya yang sudah hadir pada hari ini. Terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya. And I'll see you again, Adrian and Chester. Thank you so much. Terima kasih sekali lagi Bapak Ibu semuanya. Saya masih punya waktu kurang lebih 3 menit sebelum saya kembalikan ke Mas Andra dan Mas Yono. Dan untuk kesempatan ini mohon izin saya untuk memberikan recap ya, terkait dengan apa yang sudah disampaikan oleh Adrian dan juga Chester. Ada satu kalimat yang menurut saya itu jadi kunci mengawali perjalanan kita bersama dengan Adrian. Dan mereka menyampaikannya di awal, yaitu apa yang dikatakan oleh CEO-nya dari yang kita tahu ada WD40 itu ya. Dia mengatakan bahwa let's wait the crisis. Ini sebuah pandangan yang sangat menarik sekali ketika kita pengen cepat keluar dari krisis, malah justru dia mengatakan, loh jangan sia-siakan krisis yang sekarang ada. Kenapa? Karena di tengah krisis itu banyak sekali opportunity. Opportunity-nya bukan hanya aspek bisnis, tapi opportunity kita bisa menunjukkan kepemimpinan kita kepada tim kita. Opportunity untuk kita bisa membangun organisasi yang lebih kokoh, tim yang lebih kompak, budaya yang lebih kuat. Dan Adrian dan juga Chester mengatakan terkait dengan apa yang disampaikan oleh former CEO dari Ford ya, bahwa it's always about people. Nah, krisis nyatukan kita, krisis menguatkan kita semua yang ada dalam organisasi yang sebelumnya terpecah-pecah akhirnya menjadi satu gitu. Dan untuk supaya bisa menghasilkan itu, mereka menyarankan berdasarkan risetnya mereka ada 3 E. Engage, enabled, dan energized. Terkait dengan engage berarti kita perlu membangun interaksi yang lebih dekat, lebih dalam kepada setiap orang-orang yang ada di sekitar kita. Tadi Chester mengungkapkan berkali-kali tentang transparansi, tentang building trust. Adrian menambahkan tentang showing that we care, menunjukkan bahwa kita peduli dengan mereka. Ajukan pertanyaan, gimana kamu hari ini, apa sih yang kamu inginkan 2-3 tahun ke depan. Itu engagement yang seperti itu akan membuat tim kita menjadi semakin kuat. Kemudian E yang kedua adalah enabled. Dalam konteks ini kita nggak bisa cuma sekedar minta anak buah kita untuk kerja dan hasilkan sesuatu yang luar biasa, tapi kita nggak support dia dengan tools, alat bantu, infrastruktur yang bisa membantu mereka mencapai itu. Maka sebagai leader kita harus fight untuk itu. Sediakan laptopnya kalau perlu, cloud-nya kalau perlu, tools apapun itu, sistemnya gitu. Karena dengan enabled, ruang mereka untuk bisa melompat lebih tinggi jadi lebih besar. Yang terakhir adalah energize. Kalau energize ini why. Pastikan bahwa anggota tim kita punya alasan yang kuat untuk mereka mau melompat lebih tinggi, untuk mau berjuang mengatasi krisis ini. Nggak cuma sekedar melewati krisis supaya cepat selesai, gitu. Tapi ada sesuatu yang agung, noble purpose yang dia perjuangkan sama-sama. Ya. Dan supaya itu bisa dilakukan, apa sih saran dari Chester dan Adrian? Sederhananya, dia menyampaikan di ujung dari presentasinya, yaitu voice and touch. Indah sekali cerita tentang bayi itu dengan Ruth perawat itu. Dua hal ini kalau kita lakukan, dan ini dua hal yang kita bisa lakukan immediately. Nggak perlu nunggu kita punya jabatan tinggi, nggak perlu nunggu kekuasaan kita luas. Ya. Kita mulai dengan voice. Voice artinya kita tunjukkan apa sih value yang kita yakini yang itu baik untuk kita semuanya. Keterbukaan, kejujuran, kerja keras, itu value. Dan kita sampaikan itu. Supaya anggota tim kita tahu apa sih sebenarnya yang mengikat kita di sini, apa kesamaan kita di sini. Namun juga jangan berhenti di voice, kita harus bergerak di touch. Nah, touch ini maksudnya adalah interaksi, ini action nyatanya. Buktikan kalau memang kita bilang bahwa kita value transparansi, kita value kerja keras, maka tunjukkan itu, ajak mereka kerja keras, biarkan mereka melihat keringat Anda. Ya. Nah, interaksi di mana kita berhubungan langsung dan membuktikan dengan aksi apa yang kita voice-kan, itulah yang kemudian akan memperkuat posisi kita sebagai leader yang nanti bisa ngajak anggota tim kita untuk rebound. Baik, sepertinya waktu saya sudah habis untuk sesi pertama ini. Semoga Bapak Ibu semuanya dapat manfaat yang banyak. Terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya. Saya rasa hampir semuanya sudah terjawab ya, walaupun tidak satu-satu saya bacakan, tapi apa yang disampaikan oleh Chester dan Adrian sebenarnya sudah addressing almost all the questions. Oke, baik. Saya Indrawan Nugroho, undur diri. Terima kasih. Saya kembalikan ke Mas Andra dan Mas Yono. Thank you so much. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.